Hello, and welcome to this Blockchain Bylines. My name is Nicolas Carey, co-founder and vice chairman of Blockchain.com. So for this Bylines episode, we're excited to host Susie Violet Ward, co-founder and CEO of Bitcoin Policy UK for special debate episode. Susie is a staunch Bitcoin advocate who believes Bitcoin is the only true cryptocurrency. So before we begin today's debate, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Bitcoin Policy UK for our viewers.
Okay, so my name is Susie Violet Ward, and I am also a Bitcoin journalist. I write about Bitcoin, only Bitcoin. And we started Bitcoin Policy UK with my co-founder, Freddie New, because we can see which way the wind was blowing in the UK, knew that there was a lot of regulation and a lot of things that were driving businesses out of the UK, that the FCA stance was actively harming investors, and that there are a lot of organisations that were being spun up, like the Digital Power Foundation and Crypto UK, that really weren't representing the digital asset space properly. And even Crypto UK weren't even representing Bitcoin. So obviously it's got a 60% dominance, and we knew that there was a big gap in education. So we had to fill that gap and make sure that we provided the right education for Bitcoin.
Very cool. Well, thank you for your advocacy. All right. Thanks, Susie. So for today's debate, we'll be discussing whether Bitcoin is the only viable digital asset, meme coins' place in the market, institutional involvement in crypto, and more. So let's get started. Okay. Altcoins are experiments that push the industry forward, even if most fail. Okay, so I tend to agree with this, and I'm expecting you not to. But I have a few points I think are important to land as it relates to alternative coins, which is to say something other than Bitcoin. Just like in the startup world, there's not just one hegemonic company that has succeeded in conquering all others. There are many startups, and most startups go out and try and capture market share by providing a different product market fit of some kind. So many of these will take on capital, they'll go build stuff, and they'll experiment and try new things, whether that's changing an economic principle, a security principle, a proof of stake consensus algorithm, or other things. These entrepreneurs are basically pushing the boundaries by investing in creating new concepts and ideas. And so to me, altcoins are not in and of themselves necessarily wrong or bad. They just represent competition. And I think if Bitcoin is to stand on its own, it has to be able to be better than competition. And competition is what makes everything better in a free market. And so to me, I don't think that altcoins are problematic or bad, but I do think it's important to define terms here. Many consumers feel that they sort of missed out maybe on the opportunity to participate in the Bitcoin sort of story, which has now been going on for over 15 years. And so they get persuaded that if they just buy the new coin or the moon coin or the Doge coin, that somehow this one is going to be the one that is their lottery ticket to financial freedom. And the fact that they only think about it like a lottery ticket and not foundationally about why the original OG of crypto, Bitcoin, has such a strong economic foundation is problematic. And so I think it's important to differentiate scams from legitimate computer science initiatives and protocols and what those things are trying to deliver on. And so I think if I were to sort of summarize this, again, Bitcoin has an extraordinary foundation. It helped inspire all kinds of new projects. It really focused on this niche, though, of being a peer-to-peer electronic cash system and store of value. And there's still some tension in delivering on that. While other altcoin projects have tried to do things like build a world computer, support decentralized software applications, and build novel use cases for everything from digital artwork to more. And so I'm in favor of experimentation. I don't want to live in a coral reef with one kind of coral. I want all kinds of ecology flourishing around it. And I think altcoins help create and push the boundaries of the industry.
Okay, so I understand that they're technologies, providing we understand that Bitcoin is the only decentralized global peer-to-peer cash that has its code programmed in that nobody can change. The other ones are VC companies with CEOs, and they can inflate their tokens. They can create it from their office over a weekend. There's not often any utility behind these things. And when tens of thousands of them are created every single week, it's impossible for the consumer to understand what's good and what isn't. So having that distinction is obviously very important. But when you've got loads of coins listed on an exchange and someone thinks, oh, I can get 1 billion coins for a fraction of the price that it would cost me to buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, and they opt for that, you have to look into the tokenomics. What is the technology doing? Why is it different? Will it go to zero next year? Because the same topped altcoins last year are not the same 10 this year. So yes, it's experimental, but I would be more comfortable if they were just described as in a beta phase, because we can't sell these things to people under the illusion that they're going to make money, because they are centralized VC companies. They are not a decentralized protocol.
I think you make a great point about some of the governance concerns and the incentives for organizations that do not have proper decentralization. And so one of the most interesting things that Bitcoin achieved was really this very elegant design to make sure that there weren't incentives that would create bad actors or mal-aligned incentives against the economic participants of the network. And so just like central banks today can print money out of thin air, many of these altcoin projects also still control their treasury and can mint coins out of thin air. And it's so important that consumers very carefully interrogate those tokenomics and the governance systems of these altcoin projects.
But you can't possibly do that. There are hundreds of thousands of them, and thousands are being spun up every single day. So it's an impossible task.
I don't think it's impossible to witness the operating track record of successful projects that have sufficiently decentralized and delivered value for things.
Can you explain that to me? Sufficiently decentralized?
Sure. So I think this goes to your Nakamoto coefficient, which is you have a variable, a quantity of variables that you think are relevant to decentralization. And I think there's some very fair ones. How many people are participating in the network mining it? Are there sufficient controls for upgrading the network? How does that happen? Where is it accessible? All these things are all relevant. And then I think there are very good examples of decentralized projects that have come forward that have elegantly designed a system that doesn't have control by any one party or group of people.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. I think there's very interesting ones like, I think Ethereum's got a colored history on this, especially after they had their original rollback of a very famous incident where part of their code basically failed, and it caused a huge leak essentially in a smart contract. And they actually rolled back the network, and it caused a huge fight within Ethereum. So that's an interesting one. I don't know. It would definitely not pass a purity test in my book. There are other projects though that have come forward. I think some of the privacy projects are super interesting, especially ones that are working really carefully to make the economic networks that they support much more private than even Bitcoin. And I think this will be an interesting one because Bitcoin in some ways was supposed to be this peer-to-peer pseudonymous electronic cash system. And now it's so mapped. So many of the addresses are basically tied to identities. It's not really clear that we have sufficient privacy on the Bitcoin network anymore.
But privacy and decentralization are not the same thing. So what is this? What is a decentralized chain as far as you're concerned? Because when we discussed at the beginning, Ethereum is a 2 and Bitcoin is sitting in the 9,000s. Most of the other ones are sitting in the mid-20s. As far as I'm concerned, none of them are decentralized.
Well, they'd be decentralized on a spectrum, right? And I think that's very, it goes from 0 to 100, and you've got Bitcoin, which is obviously highly decentralized and has a very unique, elegant model for protecting itself, and has been attacked by every potential adversary possible and continues to survive, despite the fact that, the most powerful entities in the world were trying to suppress it over the previous decade.
I think it's the anti-fragility, I think, that's the most genius thing.
Very, very clever. And so that's why I think the ones that survive over the long period of time, I totally buy your argument that it's very difficult for consumers to tell as hundreds of these new things launch every single week. No one has enough time to evaluate all those things, which is why through the lens of history, you get a little bit of a better idea of which one of these projects have longevity, which ones are attracting, developers to work on them. That doesn't necessarily mean they aren't fully decentralized, but it does mean they have an operating track record.
So do you agree that Bitcoin is the only decentralized digital currency?
I would say today, Bitcoin is the most sufficiently decentralized of the market participants and has proven it.
This is an interesting one.
Uh-oh.
Institutions getting involved in crypto is good for the industry and the public.
After you.
So I take exception to the word crypto here because I'd like to split it out between Bitcoin and crypto.
Okay.
I do think that I personally don't like institutions getting involved in Bitcoin. I think it's becoming too centralized, and I think that that's how it's probably going to be co-opted. However, I am pro-choice, and I think that people should have the choice to buy this asset as they want. They should be able to put it into a 401k or a pension, etc. And I think it's also inevitable that institutions are going to get on board. And if Bitcoin can't survive institutions, then it doesn't deserve to exist. So that goes back to the anti-fragility that we were talking about, that it has to have everything thrown at it, including this. When it comes to crypto, well, we know that the way that Bitcoin and crypto are categorized, especially in the UK, is not correct. They're both considered to be restricted mass market investments, which means that Bitcoin is being lumped in the same as a meme coin. So from that point of view, I think if they can actually start to categorize it correctly, I think that will create less consumer harm. And I think from that point of view, if we can create a divide, then maybe I can get on board with it.
Yeah, this is a tough one, especially for crypto OGs that have been in the market for a long time. I think, it was funny in the earliest days of operating in the digital asset space or the Bitcoin space, no one said, we were always told this would never work. This was just selling stuff to dorks and nerds on the internet. And it was only used to buy things, on these nefarious websites. And then it was, this would be used for, financing illicit activity. And then it was just, we got all these arguments and they came in waves. And, Bitcoin was highly criticized for all these things forever. And then at the end of it, there's sort of I forget that quote was something like, first they fight you and then, they laugh at you, or first they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then, they join you and then you win. And I think we've passed that sort of, the big fight stage, and we're certainly.
You think we've passed that, even though our regulators haven't got a clue between Bitcoin and crypto?
Oh, I would say there was a lot more of a threat to the survival of this 6 years ago or 10 years ago than there is today. So that's what I mean by the big fight.
Yeah.
The fact that BlackRock has launched an ETF, it's one of the most successful ETFs in the history of that firm's very successful ETF offerings, demonstrates that at least on like some of the knowledge curve, there's definitely an understanding that this is a product that their customers want, that they want to build something for it and then sell it. And they think they can make money doing so, which is why I bundled it up. But I actually think that in terms of, whether or not it's good for Bitcoin, it's definitely got some issues around the centralization of custody. And the concerning aspect of that is those coins that are being purchased are not ending up in a decentralized custody system. They're ending up in one of 3 crypto clouds, basically, held on behalf of customers. And at the end of the day, there's some concerns I have about that, which is why one of the huge challenges we have in our industry is educating people about the nature and importance of self-custody, which is to say you become the owner and custodian of the bearer assets, which are Bitcoin themselves, by holding them in either hardware wallet or a non-custodial wallet. But this is also very difficult to teach and educate, and it comes with different risks. And so when I think about institutions, to me, I'm excited that folks like my parents, who really don't yet understand how to fix a printer or still struggle with setting up their iPhones, can actually economically participate via, methods that they're comfortable with, which may be, buying and selling through their brokerage accounts or whatever. And they've heard about Bitcoin. They buy the argument around digital gold. They see inflation eating away at their savings, and they've been persuaded by their kids and grandkids that this is a good investment, but they're probably not really ready for the sort of requirement that self-sovereignty and self-custody sort of requires. And so I think in general, I'm interested that institutions have arrived. I think it increases market access. I think it will definitely drive more economic participants that are going to come in and acquire crypto and Bitcoin specifically, hopefully. But I do think it's really important, and it behooves us in the education space to really kind of continue to make those arguments around self-custody and to engage with that when it's appropriate.
Yeah. But it also starts people's journeys, doesn't it? It's a really good way of getting people to actually start.
Totally agree. And also, I mean, there's no debate that it's now highly legitimized, the asset class and Bitcoin specifically. I mean, you've got the president of the United States talking about establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The United States backed the dollar with two things over the last century, basically petrol reserves and a lot of gold. And now it's saying, you know what? Stuff that existed in the atomic world, we want electronic money now, and we want to back up Bitcoin with a lot of security, and we want to own some of it. And I think what the President of the United States is doing there is pretty thought-provoking and pretty innovative, and really stands in contrast to some of the positions that other governments have taken over the past 10 years. And so we'll see how that plays out, but I think it's a really big deal.
No, game theory is going to
Totally
kick
theory.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay. All right, you ready?
Oh, no, I'm not. What is it?
Meme coins have a place in the digital asset space.
No.
No.
No, just why would they?
So I think meme coins represent it's almost like a aspect of culture from the internet. The internet has developed its sort of own sense of humor about things, and it's a transnational, international, digital type of humor. And so I think humor plays an extremely important role in normalizing everything from relationships to allowing us to have a foil against, complicated concepts. It allows us to provoke discovery of truth by pointing out things that make people uncomfortable. And so meme coins to me are just a way of sort of making, sort of having a tongue-in-cheek moment with something. And so I find humor to be extremely valuable. Some of my favorite actors, my favorite movies, things I rewatch and spend my time on are comedies. And so to me, meme coins allow for new crypto curious people to playfully sort of begin their journey into crypto and specifically hopefully find their way to proper digital assets like Bitcoin. And I do think it can play kind of a pathway to that. And so I do find meme coins to be helpful in sort of a non-intellectual way of sort of getting exposure to digital assets and learning more about the foundations of money. But I do think people need to be extremely careful in these things. They're deliberately designed, arguably with almost no economic principles whatsoever. Dogecoin being one of the more famous ones, which has an inflationary schedule that is totally erratic. Some days it mints hundreds of thousands of new coins and other days not at all. And so that is not the kind of thing you want to build an investment portfolio around necessarily. And then there are other meme coins that are arguably trying to back their way into utility and decentralization. But again, I think, jury's a little too soon to tell on those.
But you can have memes without meme coins. Memes are brilliant. And I agree that they're amazing. When you see a good meme, there's nothing better, is there? Like, it really is brilliant. And I love comedy too. And I laugh all the time at everything. But I don't think meme coins are funny. I think that they're damaging. I think they hurt people. I think that they lure them into a false sense of security. And I think people have lost a lot of money and have probably been hurt by them. They don't understand that the supply can go up, that they're centralized, that there are pump and dump schemes. They're often associated with rug pulls. And so people put their money in thinking that they can buy 1 billion tokens of something, and that's way better than buying a fraction of a Bitcoin. And so therefore, psychologically, they think because they've got more, that it's actually going to do better.
I do think when people buy a meme coin, it's hard for me to believe that they're making a long-term investment decision. I think sometimes they're literally just there to play with them. And so my view is that if you find it interesting, you find it playful, know what you're getting into, do your research. That's always number one. And be careful out there because there are bad actors that are taking advantage of these things. And it is so important you take a look at the fundamentals of these things before you put any money into them. If your expectation is that you're trying to, grow your wealth.
No one looks into the fundamentals, do they? They just think, oh, look, I can get 1 million of these. Oh, look, I like the picture. Oh, brilliant. I read an article that said that that Bitcoin is a boomer coin and, this is going to be the new Bitcoin. And then they just ape into it, don't they? I mean,
yeah, but
generally.
I think it would be intellectually dishonest to say that we should control what people do with their time and money. And so it's important that, have the opportunity to learn what those things are. And then I still think you should let people make their own personal decisions about things. And so one of the things I don't mind about meme coins is that, well, sure, but this is why you can go to a platform like blockchain.com. You can read up about these different digital assets. You can decide and make a decision for yourself whether or not you want to participate in it. And that's up to you at the end of the day. Just like you take economic risk buying a house, buying a car, investing in stocks, or, buying things like gold, tin, or silver. You're always making a decision of, and it's, the market forces to change the cost of the price of things all the time.
That's a really good point, actually, because I do think that if you do get your fingers burned, then you're more likely to move to Bitcoin. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's, if you look at the track record of Bitcoin, specifically in its performance over time, anyone that's bet against Bitcoin has been burned themselves. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk about meme coins being a playful way to learn about money, to come up the financial fluency curve a little bit, it's also a great way to come back to, the foundations and fundamentals of hard money in a digital form.
Satoshi Nakamoto should reveal his identity.
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not.
We agree on something.
Yes.
This is one of the most interesting myths. And one of the things I think that was so foundational to the story of Bitcoin, which is who created it? Why would they do this? If they have so much personal wealth, wouldn't they want to flaunt it? Or wouldn't they, want the recognition and all that? And I think it's one of the more kind of beautiful humanist things. And I recently was out on a long walk in Cornwall, and I came across the King Arthur statue on the shoreline there. And King Arthur is an incredible sort of mythical character too. If you look into the historical documents, it's very unclear whether or not that person actually ever existed. But the ideas that they stood for, this sort of chivalry and doing right for most people. And I think in order to sometimes do the best good in the world, you kind of have to be anonymous and not have your motives questioned and let the work speak for itself. And so I think if Satoshi had revealed who he or she was, every decision they'd ever made, everything about them would have been ripped to shreds, and it would have decredentialized this beautiful body of work that they've contributed to computer science, economics, and human freedom. So I would say, please, whoever it's been, we all owe you an extraordinary debt of gratitude and more. But please, I hope you're just chilling on a beach or.
Do you think they're alive?
I don't know. I hope they are.
Who do you think it is?
No idea.
You don't even have a tiny little.
I think we all got caught up in trying to find, in the early days, there was every few weeks someone was trying to dox someone else for being the founder of Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, I sort of stopped worrying about who it was. And I let I think that's the conspiracy theorists will continue to rage on this one, but I don't think we'll honestly ever find out.
So you don't even have one person in mind?
I got nothing for you.
Really? Oh, okay.
And if I knew, I wouldn't tell you anyway.
Well, you don't know, do you? You just might guess.
No guesses. No.
Okay. I've gone through quite a few, actually.
It's like a grail quest. Are you doing this on the side?
No. I actually thought it was. I did think it was Hal Finney for quite a long time, actually, because usually when you do testing, you use yourself as a test.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And so because it was sent between Satoshi and Hal, for me, that was the thing that made me think, actually, yeah. And then somebody said to me the other day, because I disregarded the Jack Dorsey one. I was like, don't be silly. He wouldn't walk around with a T-shirt saying Satoshi if he was Satoshi. That's crazy.
Or would he? Because he's playing three-dimensional chess and he's trying to keep everybody off his tail, but by being ironical. Yes, exactly. That thought did cross my mind. But also, apparently he was wearing an Adam Back T-shirt in 1996 when he was at university. So that I thought, okay, maybe it could be. Well, I think he's just honoring some cypherpunks, which is pretty cool. But hopefully, I honestly think we'll never find out. But I think this mystery will provoke ongoing amount of research and investigations and storytelling, and there'll be movies made about this. And just like Robin Hood and King Arthur and other mythical characters that have contributed, to storytelling over time, I think Satoshi Nakamoto will be one of those enduring personalities. And it's kind of nice because by having this vessel, it sort of allows anybody to put themselves into it. And we're all Satoshi is
Well,
sort
hang
of
on. There's somebody who's legally not Satoshi Nakamoto.
well, there is. Would you would like to name them?
No, I don't want to name them.
Oh, why not? You're afraid of getting sued?
No, because I don't want to give him the credibility.
Oh, okay. Well, he who shall not be named.
Exactly. Yeah, there is one person who is legally not Satoshi.
All right, I'm going to pick up the next card. Mass adoption is within 5 years.
Mass adoption of Bitcoin, or are we talking mass adoption of crypto?
I'd say mass adoption of Bitcoin, meaning 1 billion people own some fraction of some Bitcoin.
I think it could happen very quickly.
Okay. Let me follow up with that. How does it happen quickly?
I think that we could be heading into a period of hyperinflation, and I think it could happen to countries that you wouldn't even expect it to. And I think that Bitcoin is going to be that lifeboat that people are going to need as the current financial system crashes. And I think the system did start crashing in 2008 when the white paper was released. And I think it's been crashing ever since, but we've just been papering over the cracks.
And we're not just papering over it. We've printed extraordinary amounts of money, and the pain that is felt across kitchen tables around the world in Western democracies because of the rising costs of goods and inflation is very serious. And so what's scary, especially I think for young people, is that if they just think about the wealth that they're earning through income today, if absolutely nothing happens, their purchasing power will basically decrease by 50% in the next 5 years.
Yep.
And so one of the things I love to share with people is if you want Bitcoin to become mass adopted, if you want a hyper Bitcoinization to occur, one of the best ways to do that is set up 5 of your friends or strangers with a Bitcoin wallet and just send them $5 worth of Bitcoin and just say you're welcome and get that out in the wild. And if everybody that owns a little bit of Bitcoin today finds 5 people to send it to, over the next 5 years, we'll have 1 billion people
How
with
would you
Bitcoin.
send it? Would you send it on a wallet of Satoshi or something like that, though?
Well, I think you got to send it through a great wallet, probably a blockchain.com wallet.
Okay, because I was thinking like people then change their phones, because I've done that. I've actually given people Bitcoin and then they've changed their phone, and I'm like, well, what did you do with it? It's it's on my old phone. I'm just like,
Oh, well, when you switch phones, if you have a blockchain.com wallet, when you install your new phone, your wallet's still there and your coins are still there.
Okay.
So let's dig into the UK crypto regulation. This is especially an area of your keen interest. So I know we talked a little bit about the differentiation between Bitcoin and crypto in your mind. How do you sort of educate that difference to UK policymakers, and why do you feel that distinction is so critical?
So currently in the UK, all crypto, including Bitcoin, has been categorized as a restricted mass market investment. So that is something that needs to change. Bitcoin is a commodity, and crypto has to be treated, and it's correct that crypto is a restricted mass market investment, but it should not be the same as Bitcoin. And the way that I would liken it for the difference between the two is Bitcoin is like pure water and crypto is like fizzy drinks. It's full of all the shit that you don't want in your body. They're both liquids in the same way that they're both cryptos, but they are not the same. I think that when we talk about crypto, we should be saying Bitcoin and crypto. I think it's a really important distinction, and I get quite annoyed when it does get lumped in because it is a little bit disingenuous.
So throughout our conversation, you have been adamant about differentiating between Bitcoin and crypto and maybe digital assets. And I think one of the challenges in our industry is naming things and differentiating them. And this all gets extra confusing if you don't have your taxonomy for things. Talk to us why you're so passionate about that, and why you think that's so relevant to get these terms right and really differentiate Bitcoin from all these other things. Give us a bit of a rundown.
So as I said before, Bitcoin is pure water and crypto is like fizzy drinks. And so when you are lumping it in together just as crypto, people aren't able to make informed decisions. They think that they're the same. They don't understand that one is a decentralized protocol that is where the code can't change, or it has to change by consensus, that anybody can participate in the system, and that it's a completely different thing to the VC companies that have CEOs that can inflate their supply and can issue tokens to themselves just on a whim. And it has to be broken down separately so that people understand the fundamental difference. One is a decentralized protocol. The other are VC companies.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much for coming to this debate. I think you made some fantastic points. I think Bitcoin sort of lit this fire that basically inspired all kinds of new thinking about people's relationship with money and wealth. And that came with some really great things. And it's also introduced a whole bunch of new complexities and issues that consumers have to grapple with, and regulators and others. And so thank you so much for coming to share your perspectives and doing all your work on the UK policy side. And without further ado, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this debate, and join us for the next Bylines episode.
Thank you for having me.